Hey everyone, and welcome to your Daily Detroit. It's Tuesday, February 6th, 2024, sharing what to know and where to go in Southeast Michigan. I am Jer Stays, and on the other end of the line is
Fletcher Sharp.
Good to talk with you, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course. So a little bit of a slower week, but I think any sort of week after the Lions' journey the last couple of months, it's going to feel slow no matter what happens, man, right?
Yeah, it's kind of like withdrawal where you're like, oh, the season's over. Like, what do? You just got to hold on till more football shows back up. But I mean, as we've seen, when the Lions are good, there's a lot more things to break down versus, them just being bad and not wanting to talk about them. So it's a gift that keeps on giving.
For sure. Now, we're going to start with a little bit of sad news, and then we'll talk a little bit about the Lions, and then I think we'll end with kind of a compare and contrast between the Lions and the Pistons. We were talking about a little bit about this off air, and I want to get into it, but let's start. I hate sharing this kind of news, but I think it's important because people like Earl, the Twirl Cureton, he has been a community ambassador for the Pistons for a number of years. He suddenly died over the weekend, age 66, very active out there for the Detroit Pistons, all kinds of their nonprofit stuff that they're working on. Big advocate for U of D. He's a former University of Detroit basketball star. He had a pretty big career. He played for 7 NBA teams, got himself 2 titles. 3 of those years were spent with the Pistons. I got to say, it's just something that, having met the guy a couple of times and been able to interact with him, everybody I know that interacted with him a lot more got the same vibe I did, that he was a really good guy and really into the community and really loved the city. Fletcher, what I want to ask you, he played in the Pistons, 83 to 86. Very different game back then, huh?
Yeah, they allowed hand checking back then. So seeing these amazing players like Steph Curry and such, maybe Steph Curry, but a lot of these players wouldn't have been a thing back then because all it would take is one hand on your hand and you're not dribbling the ball ever again.
So talk about that for a second, the hand checking, because that's been gone for a long time.
The NBA made a big stride. They wanted to make sure that they put points on because while Pistons fans enjoyed that 03-04 championship, a lot of people did not like seeing games that were ended up being 79 to 67. They were like, we want to see points. We want to see amazing. So they got rid of hand checking. They got a lot more rules that benefited the offense. The continuation rules changed to allow you to have a bit more of a step when you go up for it. Even stuff like dribbling. Like Kyrie Irving now is an amazing basketball dribbler. Back then would be, either considered a warlock for what he could do with the ball, or he'd be called for traveling 70% of the time because what he does is borderline even for now. It's just the way the game changed. But back then, as you see a lot of basketball old heads talk about, it was more about the physicality. So it's we can maybe shoot a 3 if we need to, but go take that mid-range jump shot, get in the paint, lay the ball up type of stuff. And whereas now it's you get a 3-on-1 fast break, it's going to end in a 3-point shot. Very different game. If you've watched both of them, it's a little bit jarring to see how the game has changed so much from then to now.
It's interesting to see how systems can work together to make it, because I'll hear people be like, oh, it was 120 to 110 or whatever. All of that is intentional and was created by systems because it did not used to be that way.
No, games used to be, I'm not going to say that games did not get crazy, but the record for the most points scored in a game, I think, was between the Nuggets and the Pistons. And it was 145 to 141. And Alex English had an amazing game, but that was a triple overtime game. Today, that could be 1 overtime, maybe. The rate that players are scoring 65, 70 points now is insane. I think we've had 5 or 6 players top 55 points in the past month, which back then would be insane. If someone's scoring 55, it's because they're taking every single shot, doing every single thing here. Meanwhile, someone can score 60, 70 points and their teammate could also get 15 or 20, it's an insane thing to think about. You think back to when Kobe scored his 81, no one else was in double digits. I think maybe Chris Mim was close with 8 or 9 points, but no one was anywhere near double digits otherwise. Whereas now you got players doing it and other players are still able to maybe get double digits in points. So while some people really like the points, personally, I don't like seeing someone dribble the ball up the court slowly and be able to lay it up because no one's stopping the ball because they're so focused on stopping a 3-point shot. That's not really good basketball to me, but I guess that's not really the conversation. Yeah, the game has definitely evolved and changed.
Well, rest in peace, Earl. Thank you for your contributions to the Detroit community. You did a lot through the Pistons. did a lot through UDM, and I just wanted to mention it and take us a little bit down memory lane. All right, let's talk Lions. Fans are very happy on the news that Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator, and Aaron Glenn, the defensive coordinator, are both staying in Detroit, not taking head coaching jobs when a lot of people thought that they would. We haven't talked since this news kind of broke, Fletcher. I put some of this stuff out on Facebook, and I got to tell you, number one, I am reminded that how big of a megaphone Facebook can be with the right kind of content, because holy crap, like hundreds of thousands of you showed up to talk about it, and saw that post. But also, this is a big deal for the Detroit Lions organization and answers a couple of very big questions going forward.
I'd be more sad if Aaron Glenn left because his defense kind of started clicking near the end. Obviously, there were some deficiencies in the defensive backfield. I can't really fault the coordinator for that because at that point, it's making chicken sandwich with chicken poop. By the end of the season, like, you can do with the best you can. If they're not going to cover, they're not going to cover. I can't put all that on you. What I can put on you is picking out schemes going into the next year to kind of mask that if you don't get players to fix it. But Ben Johnson, I was kind of take it or leave it. While he is a brilliant mastermind in terms of getting the best out of the players on this Lions roster, he gets too cute at times with plays, and you're like, what are you doing? Like that one play where they ran with Amon-Ra St. Brown on third down, that was really silly. Why did you feel the need to do that? But having someone like that is really helpful because it keeps defenses on their toes. So the fact he is staying is good because it definitely means they can grow into this offense a bit more, retool some stuff, try to figure out ways to get the best out of the offense and maybe help. I mean, Goff he's not young, but he's not old. He's not like Kurt Warner unable to move, but he's not also, 22, 23 years old. But try to figure out a way to kind of help him play on the move. Because again, it's been mentioned multiple times. He's one of the best pocket quarterbacks in the league, but also if you put pressure on him, he's one of the worst in the league. So maybe figure out some ways to kind of get him on the move, able to complete passes and, move the sticks. Overall, it's good to keep both because you keep continuity within the organization. And this is why the Lions have been able to grow from 2 years ago to last year to now is continuity. They've had the same faces for the most part, learning and absorbing and evolving from there. So always good to continue continuity.
Speaking of getting the right players, Brad Holmes had a press conference with members of the media for an end-of-year wrap-up. And there was one section which I would describe as taking a victory lap for some of the picks that he made and talked about how it was important to not just draft or pick people for the raw talent, not just the fastest guy, but the right fit. And that a lot of his picks that people were very skeptical of ended up panning out. Thoughts, Fletcher?
The only first round pick of Brad Holmes that I waffled on was not feeling great about until the end was Aiden Hutchinson. That's because Kayvon Thibodeau was tearing stuff up at Oregon. I literally just watched him throw grown men around, and I'd also just watch Aiden Hutchinson get shut down by Georgia. And I was like, ooh, which one do I want? The created-looking character who looks like you just picked a character and put his muscles all the way up to the top and is throwing grown men around, or do I want the guy who's a hometown kid but got beat by NFL-caliber linemen? I want the first guy. So when the Lions got Hutchinson, I was like, I don't know about this. Feels like they're picking at heartstrings and not, using their head. And I was wrong. I admitted into the year. I'm like, I'm wrong. Thibodeau having a nice career so far. Aiden Hutchinson's having like Hall of Fame caliber career if he continues at the pace he's going. So save for that one pick, every pick Brad Holmes has taken in the first 3 rounds, I've been like, yeah, that makes sense. Especially last year. You can rewind the tape too. I had no problem taking Jahmyr Gibbs at 12 because he's explosive and he fit what the offense was trying to do. The only time I had a problem with him taking Jahmyr Gibbs at 12 was when the first few games when he didn't play. And I'm like, you took a player that high to not play him. That's a weird thing. Sam Laporta, I'm like, is perfect. He's from Iowa. Iowa produces, they become tight end U now. They produce high quality tight ends who catch the ball and know how to play the game properly and, use angles well. They took Jamison Williams last year, and people were like, well, he's hurt. I'm like, he is hurt. The Lions aren't going to be good this year, so you can afford to take a player who could be great, who's also hurt, because you give him time to, get healthy and do things the right way. You don't have to rush him onto the field because they're going to be bad. They're not going to go to the playoffs this year. He can afford to take some time to rest up and do what he needs to do, and it paid off very much this year. Hopefully going into next year, he gets an even bigger role so he can do some more greater things. So far, the picks they've made have been great. And not just great because they've been effective, but great because on paper, they all fit. It's not like they had a great quarterback and they took another quarterback. Like, all right, he could be the best quarterback in the history of the NFL, but you already have one. So what's happening here? Like, that's taking the raw talent. They found players who fit in positions they needed to, and it worked out great. And I think that's part of the reason why, not to segue away a little bit, why people are so frustrated with the Pistons front office is because these rebuilds are happening at the same time. They got two well-known GMs to come in who have done great at building young nucleuses at their former places in Troy Weaver and Brad Holmes. And one of them is doing great drafting off fit, and the other one is not.
Going back to the Lions for a second, your picks and your thoughts were a lot different than a lot of the pundit class around. You lined up a lot more with Brad Holmes and other people. What do you think is the difference for you versus them? Because your record's pretty good with this, and yet I'm seeing a lot of the pundit class just whiff, honestly.
Honestly, I think part of punditry is like making a pick that you wholeheartedly believe. Like, you believe it to be the case. But I think a lot of people in punditry make picks just to like be crazy. It's like, ooh, look at me. I'm making a smoothie, and instead of, using a peach, I'm going to use a dog turd. Ooh, I'm special. No, like, that's gross. Like, conventional wisdom says that's gross. You're not telling me it's like antioxidants for your skin. Like, that's a weird thing you're doing. And I think sometimes people get so pigeonholed into trying to do things that are crazy and out of the box when stuff just looks on paper like it naturally fits after trying to poke holes in it. So yeah, I know typically you don't take running backs in the first round because it's kind of like getting a new car where once you drive it off the lot, like, it deteriorates in terms of how much it's worth. So like, yeah, running backs are typically the first players to get chewed up and spit out by the NFL because they get hit all the time. But Jahmyr Gibbs on paper fit what the Lions were trying to do. He fit super well what they were trying to do on paper. It wasn't a worry about if he can play. It's like, well, he's a running back. What's going to happen here? If that's your only concern, then that's really not a concern. Like, it's one thing if you draft a player and you're like, is this guy going to be able to fit into the roster well? Is he mentally going to be able to keep up with the playbook? Is he emotionally going to be able to bond with the team? Is he going to have some emotional issues that are going to cause us to have to put him somewhere else? And like, none of the players the Lions have drafted we have had that worry about. It was like, well, they're drafting him too high. They're doing something. Otherwise, they're perfect picks. They're going to look back, hopefully, if Jahmyr Gibbs keeps at this pace, they're going to look back in 10 years and be like, wow, I can't believe we really thought that was a bad pick. And also, again, like I said, Brad Holmes has a hit track record of doing this and doing this at a pretty good rate. And he's so far with the Lions, he had not done anything that would make someone question him. Like, it'd be one thing if he had two sketchy drafts before and he drafted Jahmyr Gibbs 12, you'd be like, what are you doing? But so far, he's been hitting in every draft that he's been with the Lions so far. So I don't know why he wouldn't be given the benefit of the doubt. Like, he's shown that he deserves benefit of the doubt.
With the Pistons, we are now getting to that back section of the season. We still do not have 10 wins, and I'm holding by the Pistons may not get 10 wins by the end of the season, which is, I know, ridiculous, Fletcher. You're absolutely right. It's an absolutely ridiculous thing, but it's entirely possible at this horrible pace. Pistons fans are very frustrated, and it feels like this is a lost season. Is there anything now? Because, I mean, I know that they made one deal to shift some things around, but is this a lost season? Is this where you just shut the lights off at the performance facility until next year? Or is there something that can be done? Do we need to just start moving players or do a reset? Where are we at?
I mean, the season was lost when they lost 20 games in a row. Like, the season ended effectively there.
For sure.
Because unless they found a way to get the Monstars to come and, suck the talent out of other players and then go and play for them, they were not going to make up that hole they put themselves in to make it to the playoffs or even do something else. So, the season was lost right then. If you move anyone who's young off this team, what you're saying is that the core we thought we built was not as good. When they traded away Sadiq Bey to Atlanta, that was my initial thought is they must be saying right then, we don't think you fit into our young core aspect we had anymore. It used to be Cade and Sadiq and Stewart, and then they got rid of Sadiq, and then they brought in Jaden Ivey, and then Jalen Duren, and now they brought in Marvin Bagley, who then they got rid of, and James Wiseman, who's still been around for a while, but still really young. If you are getting rid of some of those players, Killian Hayes, who probably will be gone because I think the fan base is sour on him to the point to where you can't bring him back.
He's the name at the top of my list, considering how much buzz there is about shipping him to anywhere but here.
Yeah, the thing is, though, is I don't know who would, in the NBA, I don't know who would want him. I don't know a team that would see him and say, we want that type of player. We want point guard who's a combo guard who really isn't a gifted shooter. Defensively, he's getting better, but still isn't there. Like, who in the NBA sees that and says, ooh, me? Honestly, I think if you were a betting man, probably be looking at one of the French teams to pick him up, or maybe even Real Madrid in Spain, because I'm sure he would thrive there, just athletically able to get around where he needs to get around. In order to trade someone, you have to trade someone that like people see value in, and I'm not saying he's not valued. I just don't know if any team would want to trade anything more than like a second round pick for him.
Is the rebuild a fail?
It's hard to say whether it's a fail or not, but it's not looking great right now. It's why it's hard doing this at the same time with the Lions, because the Lions rebuild isn't necessarily over, but like it's a success so far. Like I typically give rebuilds about 5 years before I'm determining, unless you fire the coach before then. Like if you have to fire a coach, then like, yeah, your rebuild is done because clearly this is not working out. But right now, it's not looking great going forward. I still think they get to 10 wins. In the last 25 games, they're actually not the worst team in the NBA. That is the Washington Wizards, who I think the Pistons have beaten once for sure and taken down to the wire twice. So, you know, an even worse run franchise than the Pistons is the Charlotte Hornets, who I don't know what's going on there, but the Pistons, 2 of their 6 wins have come against Charlotte. So if we can maybe petition to play them a few more times near the end of the season, maybe they'll make a little comeback.
Well, would love to hear people's thoughts. dailydetroit@gmail.com or 313-789-3211. Fletcher Sharp, always good to talk to you, man.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me on.
Of course, and of course, we will check back next week. As always, don't forget to leave 5 stars on your favorite podcast app, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to shows. With that, I am Jer Stays. Remember that you are somebody, and we'll talk tomorrow.